Hello, it's Dawn Michelle from Boho Tarot, and welcome to my monthly journal flip through. Today we will be flipping through my March journal pages and chatting about the spreads, techniques, and ephemera I created to connect with my personal tarot practice last month. So for the first 2 months of 2020, January and February, I was using my Traveler's Notebook, and I created inserts within this for each of my months and for tarot challenges and my moon readings and things of that nature. Now in March, I started kind of playing with, or really late February, I started playing with some disc-bound planners. And so I thought it might be fun just for the month of March to give this a try for my tarot journal. So previously I'd been creating little inserts like this that sat in my Traveler's Notebook journal, and this was really great until I got to February and I made my insert way too big, and then I was like, well, now what do I do with all these pages? And of course you guys were so smart and you said, well, why don't you just include March in that? And yes, that would have been a fantastic idea, and I will definitely keep that in mind for moving forward. But because I had all of this new disc-bound happy planner stuff, I just really wanted to give that a try to see how this system would work for tarot journaling. So I've done the bound journals for most of my tarot practice life. I've done spiral notebooks, I have done bullet journals, I've done just plain line journals. I've done now the Traveler's Notebook, and now I'm trying the disc-bound planners. So real quick before we jump into checking out my March pages, I just want to chat real quick about how I'm finding working with the different journal methods. So most of my journaling has happened in dot grid notebooks like this one. This was my journal from the end of, the latter part of 2019. And so while this was really great and I love the freedom of the dot grids and I love that everything's archived really well, you can see it gets like really big and bulky, and it gets kind of hard to work with after a while when it starts getting all bulged up like this. So after that, working with that in 2019, I thought, well, I will try the Traveler's Notebook. And I finally got myself a Chic Sparrow notebook, which I do totally love, or Chic Sparrow cover. And I started creating the inserts. So I did the inserts through January and February, which you can see here. And then I just stacked them up on my shelf, and I had basically ideas or notions about binding them together into a book when I was done. Now, the thing I really like about this is that I can swap my inserts out per month. And, this cover is super pretty. I was able to make a kind of dashboard journal for the front of it. This is actually my tarot spreads. I had my insert in here for the month, and then my tarot by the moon. And I do really like this setup. You can take the booklets in and out, but it's a little bit more difficult just to get them in and out. And when you're in and out of it, every day, that can make it a bit more challenging to work with. Although I definitely like this system in general. Once I got all of this, I wanted to give it a try because really it's just a different kind of system, right? And so with the disc bounds, you basically create your own. You can buy these little blank notebooks, and this is what they call the mini size. So it's, roughly the size of your Traveler's Notebook. Pretty close to the size of a standard bound book. It's a little bit shorter, but about the same width. You can swap out the discs. You can buy a punch. So the pages are basically blank, and they come in and out like this. And the really wonderful thing about this is that you can take the pages out and work with them and then put them back in. And that was super helpful. And I'm thinking that I'm going to continue with this into April. And I'm thinking about making this one my spring reading. So I'm thinking I'm going to maybe get a couple of more of these, one for each season, because like I've mentioned in many of my other videos, my practice is very seasonal, and you'll definitely see that spring vibe represented in my pages throughout the month of March, because I'm really in that spring energy right now. And so I thought, how fun would it be to be able to switch it out 4 times a year in line with the season, and then maybe at the end of the year. They do make much bigger rings, so you can buy the, I'll just show you here, the bigger rings, which this one's on my regular planner, but you can buy those and make the planners bigger. So once I get all of them together, I can probably make a 2020 tarot journal. And I do like that I can move pages around, and it's really handy to be able to take them out, especially if you're going to be kind of collaging on your pages. That was really, really helpful. And I did talk about that a little bit more in my more recent Journal With Me video, which I'll leave link in the description box below. So far, I'm actually really liking this. My only real concern about this is longevity, as far as how well is it going to hold up in an archive sense. You can get like harder wraparound covers that go with it, and maybe that might be something that I want to do, or make my own if I'm going to continue with this the rest of the year. If I decide to stick with this, I can punch out my pages from my earlier traveler's notebook, and I can just cut them out and, well, actually unbind them, cut them out, and then punch them and stick them into the journal as well. So I'm kind of really liking that. So I'm going to stick with it through April and maybe through all of spring, just to see how I like it, really give it one whole season, and maybe continue on from there, or maybe switch back to my traveler's notebook. I have thought about if I want to like put these more, if I decide to switch back to a traveler's notebook, I think I can bind these. It's just going to be kind of a messy bind, but I think I could bind them and get them into a notebook with all the rest of my traveler's notebooks. So I'm not too terribly concerned about that, but I think I'm going to stick with this at least for another month, and maybe for the whole of spring. So let's take a look at my March pages. So I'm using these. It came with 3 dividers, and I'm going to use them for my months. So this one's going to be March, this one's going to be April, and this one is going to be May. That's the plan anyway, and I haven't put the months on there, but I will. I have little stickers that I can just stick them on there. So for March, I took a book page, and this is the other thing that's really cool about this. I mean, not that I can't do this in my traveler's notebooks, but I can do this, change out the papers on the fly, and that's kind of cool too. So rather than using one of the papers that came with it, I just cut out a book page to fit the right size, and then punched it, and then collaged on top of that. And that was something that if I'm binding in, one of these bound, this is my tarot one, but if I'm binding in one of these bound junk journals, then I kind of have to pre-think about that kind of stuff. Like I have to pre-plan that. Whereas this allows me to just kind of sneak those in there whenever the moment or whenever the urge occurs to me to do that. So that's actually been kind of fun to be able to use different pages and add layers without having to really think about it and plan for it ahead of time, because I can punch it and add them in anywhere. So I'm kind of digging that so far. So I took a page from Alice in Wonderland because it said the Garden of Live Flowers, which I thought was really great. Cut out a little calendar for March that I just printed off, and then scrapbook around it. So here I have my card of the month, which was the 7 of Pentacles, and I really didn't do like any journaling about it. I just put it in there, and I kind of thought about it, and then I referred to it throughout the month of March. Then over here I have kind of like my dashboard page, or my title page kind of. Well, I guess this would be more like my title page. This is like my dashboard page. And here I have the month. My moon listed for the month because I do moon readings, which I'm actually not going to show in this video because it is really the same thing over and over again. If you want to see some of those, check out the January, February one, and you can check out the moon readings in that. But it is the same thing over and over again, so I don't want to really keep showing that. Here I have the list of the decks that I used for the month. And then on the back, I left this side blank throughout the whole month of March, and then I came back at the end of March and I did my reflections, where I note how did I honor my practice, what were my challenges, and what brought me joy. So then we move into my first week of March, and here I have a big 9-card reading that I did with the Line Strider, the Scrying Ink Lenormand, and the Hedgewitch Botanical. So I was kind of trying my decks that were by the same creators, because I don't often actually pair my decks with kind of their companion oracle or cards. So I thought that would be fun to do that for this month. So I have here in the back, I have the different aspects of my reading, and then a message, and then my follow-up there. So then I have my midweek check-in, and for this I just used 1 card from each of those 3 decks. And I had my cards listed here, my check-in, and I used some scrapbooking and just some stickers and just some different papers just to add that layer and texture. Again, I was able to insert some cardstock as well And that was kind of fun because I could kind of, again, do that on the fly. So here I have my reading from Friday, and I did another Lenormand reading with tarot and then an oracle at the end. And then my reflections are on the back, so of this cardstock. So you can see here's the reading on the front, and then here's the reflections on the back. And I just added some stickers around it just for fun. And then here we have another reading that I did, which was using a tarot and oracle to just kind of check in at that moment. So that was just one of my little check-in readings that I did. I didn't ever do anything on the back of that, but I certainly could. This was my card that I pulled from the Devas of Creation for, the next couple of weeks. And I just noted the card and then a little message that I got from the card. And it's just collaged on some different papers. And then here's a little bit more that I kind of dive deep into that later on. I didn't do the dive deep into it at the same time that I pulled the card. I actually kind of sat with the card for a while, and then it kind of occurred to me this message, so I wrote that down. So I left it blank on purpose so that I could come back after I kind of worked with the card and sat with it for a couple days. So here's my spread moving into the next week, and I was using the Paulina Tarot and the Spirit Song Tarot, which again was kind of inspired by my using all of my, from the creator of the Line Strider, using all of her decks together. So then I thought, well, I'm going to use all of my Paulina decks together and my Paulina Cassidy decks. And at this point, I think I only have 2. I know there's a couple more. I might have one of the oracles. I can't remember, but I decided to use the Spirit Song and the Paulina. And so this was a new deck for me to use. Not new to my collection. I bought it last year, but I was saving it for this spring to kind of really get into it and explore it. And I just, collaged my reading. And so in this particular one, I sat with this spread for a whole week. And I just dived deeper into the messages of the Spirit Song. So each day I kind of did my full reading, and then each day I dove a little bit deeper into those 2 cards that we saw. So here we have the Shadow and the 3 of Pentacles. So I dove deeper into each of the columns. So on the 10th, I dove deeper into the Shadow and the 3 of Pentacles. And then on the 11th, I did the 9 of Crystals and the Fool. And then on I think this is supposed to say the 12th. And I wrote the date wrong because I didn't do them the same day. I did the Knight of Feathers and Death. So I kind of just sat with that one selection of cards, and I really dove deep into that. And then in the middle here, I kind of intermingle things. They're not always in chronological order because I like to keep the readings together. So if I do one reading that spans an entire week, it'll go into my journal together. But this allows me to also do my other readings, and then even though they're chronologically out of date, it keeps the information together. So I'm not breaking up information about, like, this is a spread that went on for several pages. If I had another page in there, then that would kind of break up the flow of it, and I wouldn't be able to look back at the message as a whole. So I just keep them in there that way. They are sort of chronological, but not like hard and fast rule on that, because I do like to keep each of the readings together. So here is a kind of card chat that I did with the Spirit Song because it's a new deck for me. So basically I just asked the deck a question and it gives me an answer. And then based on that answer, I asked another question and another and another and another. And it's kind of like rolls like a conversation. So that was a really fun experience. This deck really surprised me. So here you can see all of that information that I gained from that reading. And then here's a reading that I did on a particular situation that I had going on at home. So my reading is actually under here in a flip out so that it's kept fairly private, just in case, not that people really see my journal. I mean, I guess all of you see my journal, but it just keeps a little bit, when I have really, really sensitive readings, I kind of like to try to do them in the flip outs or the fold outs just so that they aren't like front and center for everybody to see. And so then we have a few more readings that I did with the Spirit Song, which I really kind of focused in on that deck after a while because that was the new one and I was just feeling really called to use it. So I have another reading here that we collaged, and you can see the reading on the back. And then again, here's another 3-card reading, although this one, it looks like I did 2 Spirit Song and a Paulina. So there's the cards that I pulled and the reading on the back. Now these ones I actually have a video on because these ones I did on camera. And then here is the beginning of the next week, and I worked with the Fairy Tale Tarot, the Fairy Tale Lenormand, and the Animals Divine Tarot, and those are all my Lisa Hunt decks. So again, I'm kind of rolling with that theme of working with decks by the same creator. So this is my initial reading, and then on the back here was actually the more expansion of my my reflections on the reading. And then what I did was I wrote like my kind of wrap-up message on the back of this little tag. So it's kind of like my wrap-up message for this whole reading, and then I can flip back and there's more here. So again, I did another conversation reading because the Animals Divine was a new deck for me. So I did another conversation where I pull a card, ask a card, pull a question, and we just kind of keep the conversation rolling that way. And then here's all of my reflections on that. Now, if you want to see how this starts out before it ends up looking like this, check out that journal with me video, because you'll see how these readings actually start out like on scrap paper and then end up in here. I think it's really important to note that like my readings don't often end up in here, like in the initial. I call that like the initial reading is like my first draft, and this is like my final draft. So here we have a midweek check-in with the Animals Divine. And again, even though I'd started the week with, these 3 decks, I really just kind of felt called to using the Animals Divine. So I really ended up focusing on that deck for the rest of the week. So I did a midweek check-in where I just pulled 3 cards from the Animal Divine and noted my reflections. And then I did a sort of week wrap-up 3-card reading, again with the Animals Divine, and I just wrote my message there. So I kind of been trying to reinvigorate my Self-Care Sunday routine. I kind of got out of that habit for a little while towards the end of last year, and then certainly into this year. I haven't been doing it much at all. And so I kind of just wanted to tap back into that, especially considering things that are, going on right now, just in the world in general. And so I did a self-care Sunday spread, and I used my Ember and Aura Tarot, which was a deck that I thought would be really great for that, and turned out it really was. So here is my my reflection. So it was what does my whole self need today? So basically I pulled a card for what does my body need, what does my mind need, what does my heart need, and what does my soul need. So that was a really nice check-in, just to kind of check in with myself and see what I need to really be focusing on for my self-care. And then here we move into really the last full week of March. And I used the Lunasol Tarot primarily, but I did integrate some of Peekaboo Rose's, Julie's Cup of Contemplation cards. And I used that kind of as sort of a prompt or an oracle. So here I have my 3 cards, and this is what I call a waterfall reading, and it's a reading that builds on itself. I do have a video that's coming out very soon that will explain that more in depth, but basically I pull my 3 cards here, and you can see there's my spread down here, note them down, and then this was my basic takeaway, my message for that reading. And then on Wednesday, I did another 3 cards, and you can see here I used Julie's card there, and that was my prompt, actually. And then I had my 2 cards that I pulled around that. And you can see here that by Friday, I pulled another 3 cards, but I actually had a 9-card reading at the end of the week. So that was really fun. Again, I have another video coming soon on how I do that. Here's that message for those 3 cards, and then my message overall for the whole reading. And then I did another self-care reading on Sunday where I pulled a card from the Cup of Contemplation cards, and I let that be my question, and then I just pulled 2 tarot cards around it using the Lunasol. Those 2 decks go together really, really well. And then finally I have my second Deva card that I pulled, and this is the one that's taking me into April, and really I think that was kind of just a perfect card for, considering what's going on in the world today. So so far that has been really, really wonderful. I have to say that my favorite part about working in the discbound is being able to just pull these pages out, and I can scrapbook, I can collage, I can do whatever it is I need to do with them, and I can pop them back in, and they go in just like that. Or in a couple of cases, like I used just straight up cardstock. So I just cut a piece of cardstock to size, punched it with the mushroom punch because I have a special punch that goes with these discs. And then I was able to use that as a page, or as we saw in the very beginning, use a book page. So that was really cool and I really enjoyed it. I'm really enjoying working with this, and I am definitely looking forward to continuing the practice. You can see it's quite full, and I have, of course, all these extra pages that I probably get used at some point, but even though it's quite full, like it doesn't end up looking like this, because I can just replace these rings with a little bit bigger ones. And that will allow it to basically get bigger if it needs to. And that's kind of fabulous too, because I can buy rings to adjust to the size of the book that I need. So far I'm actually quite impressed with it. I'm just more curious to see how it's going to hold up long term in terms of like archiving my readings. But as far as actually working in it, that's been really wonderful. Thank you for joining me for this flip through my tarot journal pages. If you'd like to find out more about any of the decks that I used this last month, check out my monthly reflections video, which you will find linked in the description box below. I hope you enjoyed this flip through and will join me again soon for more creative tarot for an inspired life.